Okay, we are going to talk about the 1932 election, and this will be the beginnings of FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This is Teddy's cousin, third cousin, I believe. And Franklin will be, in my opinion, our country's greatest president. Right? For a number of reasons that we'll get to over the next week or two or three or four, because much like Teddy, he will stretch into several different units that we talk about. The first thing we need to talk about is the fact that Roosevelt almost never becomes president. As you see here, he suffered from what was called infantile paralysis, better known as polio. It is a disease that usually affects usually affects children, but it strikes Roosevelt in his adult years. He is 39 years old by the time he contracts polio. Much like Teddy, Franklin will come from a very, very wealthy family, grows up with a lot of money, and he will use that money to help treat his polio. As you see here in the picture here, that's a picture of Roosevelt in a wheelchair. There are only, I think, 3 surviving pictures of Roosevelt in a wheelchair. It was a very different time then. You know, the press nowadays looks for every opportunity to embarrass public figures, but back then, 1932, the press respected the office of the president and respected presidents and didn't try to find pictures that might compromise them. So we don't have a lot of pictures of Roosevelt in a wheelchair. That's one of the few there. See him with the little girl, and that's that big black blob in his lap. That's his dog there. But anyway, Roosevelt would contract polio. He would be paralyzed from the waist down. He could stand for brief periods of time, but he had very thick, heavy braces on his legs to support him. And what could have completely derailed Roosevelt's political career, the polio, he actually turns and uses to his advantage. Roosevelt will use the money from his family there to found a treatment spa, basically, for polio victims. They didn't know how to cure it, but they could help alleviate some of the pain with hot springs, warm, natural springs. So he founds a spa to treat his polio in Warm Springs, Georgia. He builds a facility there and invites polio victims from around the country. They can come and stay there for free to get treatments. And most, as I said a while ago, most polio victims are children. So you see in the picture there, the little girl right here. It's hard to see, but if you'll notice on her back leg, you can see a brace there. Roosevelt had a very soft spot in his heart for children, especially those afflicted with polio. But what the polio does is it puts Roosevelt, a very rich, wealthy Northeasterner, he's from New York, it puts him in touch with common, average, everyday people. Because this spa, as I said, is in Warm Springs, Georgia. It's in the deep south, middle of nowhere, farm country. And he then will come into contact with poor Southerners, people that he never would have had anything to do had it not been for his polio. So the polio actually gives Roosevelt a chance to learn something about people that he wouldn't have otherwise. Okay? He has a special car built for him that has a hand brake and hand accelerator that he drives around the countryside of Georgia, talking to the farmers who are struggling. We talked about in our 1920s unit that farmers struggled throughout the 20s because of growing too much food and Europe not buying any food. So farmers are really struggling. And Roosevelt comes face to face with them and begins to understand exactly what they're going through. So what could have completely derailed his political career, Roosevelt actually turns to his advantage. Next, let's talk a little bit about his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt. This is her in the picture on the right there. Roosevelt, or Eleanor was really known as sort of the conscience of Franklin Roosevelt. It was Eleanor that pushed for concern for the poor. It was Eleanor that pushed for concern for minorities. She was the most politically active First Lady in history, really only rivaled by probably Hillary Clinton during her years as First Lady. Eleanor is the most politically active First Lady that we have ever seen. It is Eleanor that convinces Franklin to do a lot of the work to help the poor and the struggling through the Great Depression. Okay. Franklin, we're back to Franklin now, Franklin Roosevelt will be nominated as the Democratic nominee in the 1932 election. Okay. And the Democratic platform will be one of sweeping reforms, huge changes to the federal government, especially federal government's role when it comes to business. If you'll recall, Republicans throughout the 1920s let businesses do what they wanted to, and the economy collapsed and people struggled. Hoover did very little to help the people. He helps businesses, which he hopes will help the people, but Roosevelt says that money is replaceable. People are not. So the Democratic platform here will be one of sweeping social changes in the government and in society, that they are going to help the common people. Okay. Now, the group helping Roosevelt get this message out is known as the Brain Trust. Okay. And the Brain Trust will be a group of Roosevelt's advisors. These are usually young college professors. They will write many of the speeches that Roosevelt gives. It is them who come up with many of the ideas that will be present in Roosevelt's platform, the New Deal. So it's really the Brain Trust that comes up with most of the ideas. Roosevelt will simply be the public speaker. He'll be the face of the Democratic Party. Okay? One of the biggest challenges Roosevelt has to overcome is the fact that people are convinced that this is the end. This is where America will collapse, that we can't recover from this, that life is just over. He's got to change people's attitudes. He's got to change people's way of thinking about the Great Depression. He's got to convince them that we can get through this, that things are going to get better. Therefore, happy days are here again. It was a campaign song. Happy days are here again, the skies above are clear again, and so forth. You can listen to it if you want. But everywhere Roosevelt went, that song was playing. Happy days are here again. That things are going to get better. Things are going to turn around. That with his leadership, we can get out of this mess. So happy days are here again, blared through speakers everywhere he went, every speech he gave. That played before he came on stage and after he left stage. So that's Roosevelt and the Democrats. The Republicans are going to nominate current President Herbert Hoover for re-election, mainly because they know they can't win. People are very, very, very unhappy with the Great Depression, with the economy, with the government. They blamed Hoover for the whole thing. There was absolutely no way a Republican was going to get elected. So the Republican Party figured, why just offer up some young, promising politician to be slaughtered by Roosevelt? Why take a good young candidate only to have him destroyed? So Hoover takes one for the team here. He knows he can't win. The Republicans know he can't win. Everybody knows he can't win. But he'll get nominated, and the results will lose greatly. He'll lose one of the most lopsided electoral college victories in history, loses by over 7 million popular votes. There is a famous saying that Hoover could not have won even if the Republicans had been given the ability to count the ballots. There was absolutely no way he was going to win, and he doesn't. Roosevelt will win an easy election. And in Roosevelt's acceptance speech, we get a very famous quote in his inauguration speech, rather. He says that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That we have nothing to be afraid of except being afraid. So let's stop being afraid. We got to fix this country, and we can do it together. That's Roosevelt's message. Okay? One of the things that we see come out of this election, and really holds true still today, is that the Democratic Party is going to get a new ally, the black vote. Blacks will overwhelmingly vote for Roosevelt in 1932, and still to this day, majority of black voters vote Democrat. So the Democrats will pick up a new ally here. Okay? So that's it for this slide, and we'll see you on the next one.